At the college gate, the sun hung low and restless, catching on the steel of the cars that lined the street when Harry, distracted and hurrying, crashed into a man she thought was her brother. Her arms went around him before her mind caught up, a brief, startled embrace that felt like an echo from a dream she shouldn't have had. The man stood tall, sharply dressed, his scent clean and cold, and when she looked up, her breath stopped. His eyes were darker than the asphalt beneath them, unreadable, fixed on her as if the world had gone silent. "Brother," she whispered, stepping back, her cheeks burning. His gaze didn't move. Around him, his guards had gone still too, and only when a voice called her name, her real brother's, warm and careless, did the moment break. "Harry, this is Swan, my friend," her brother said, laughing lightly, unaware of the way the air had shifted. Swan's lips curved, but his eyes stayed on her. "You can call me Swan, not brother," he said, his tone low enough that only she could hear. She stammered an apology and turned away, heart pounding, while he stood there, the echo of her touch still burning through the calm he wore like armor. That night, when the city went quiet, he could still feel where she had touched him, and no amount of silence could cool the memory. That night, sleep took Harry like a fever she couldn't escape. The room felt too still, her thoughts too loud, and somewhere inside that silence, she heard water, the steady rhythm of it, like someone showering just beyond her door. She called out, her voice barely more than a whisper, and when she stepped forward, the steam curled around her like smoke. A shape moved through it, tall, broad-shouldered, familiar in a way that made her pulse tremble. "Who's there?" she asked, but part of her already knew. The figure turned slightly, enough for her to see the line of his back, the dark fall of his hair, and she felt a strange pull in her chest, fear and fascination intertwined. "Why are you here, brother?" The word fell apart as she said it. The air thickened, pressing against her skin until she could hardly breathe. Then the dream shattered, cold, sudden, merciless, and she woke gasping, her sheets twisted around her like she'd been fighting something. Her hands shook as she reached for water, the glass trembling against her lips. "Why that?" she whispered to no one, the taste of guilt sharp in her mouth. The night outside was still, but her heart wasn't. It beat too fast, carrying the echo of a dream she wished she hadn't wanted to remember. Morning came too bright, too ordinary for the way Harry felt. She went through her training, each movement mechanical, her mind fogged by the dream that refused to fade. By the time she returned home, the sun was low again, gold leaking into shadows, and a voice carried from downstairs, deep and calm, threading through the air like something dangerous wrapped in silk. Her steps slowed. She knew that voice. When she reached the doorway, her father was there, talking with him, Swan, seated in her father's favorite chair, his presence filling the room as if it had been built for him alone. "Harry," her father said, noticing her, "my younger daughter." Swan's eyes lifted to her, unreadable, like dark glass hiding something alive beneath. Her father's phone rang. He excused himself, leaving them in the kind of silence that felt like a test. Swan stood slowly, closing the space between them without a sound. A strand of her hair had come loose, and before she could move, his hand reached out, not rough, not soft, just deliberate. "Why do you look afraid?" he asked quietly. His words landed like a weight, and she stepped back, breath caught halfway. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, something darker. She turned and fled, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Behind her, his voice came low, more thought than speech. "You keep running, Harry," he murmured. "And still I find you." The night of the party felt wrong from the start. Music, laughter, the glitter of glasses, everything too bright, too loud, too perfect for the tension that had been living in Harry's chest since that afternoon. Her father and brother moved through the crowd like hosts in their element, and then she saw him, Swan, standing near the window, the city's light reflected in his eyes. He didn't belong to the noise or the color. He seemed carved from the quiet itself. Her father's voice carried across the room, calling her closer. "Harry, say hello to Swan, my friend." Swan turned, gaze steady, the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth that wasn't quite a smile. The sound of his name was enough to twist something inside her. She managed a polite nod before slipping away toward her friends, needing distance she couldn't quite keep. In the safety of chatter and music, she listened, the girls whispering about him, their words spilling like perfume. Rich. Untouchable. The one everyone wants to understand but no one dares to approach. Harry said nothing, pretending not to hear, but every word tightened the pull she already hated. Later, passing down the corridor for air, she saw him again through an open door, the party noise fading behind her. He was alone, loosening his cuffs, eyes lowered, a picture of calm control that shouldn't have made her heart ache the way it did. For a second she thought of turning back, but something colder, quieter held her there. When he looked up and saw her, the air shifted again, not recognition, but inevitability. "You're following me now?" he asked softly. She shook her head, unable to form an answer. "No," she whispered. But she didn't finish. He stepped closer, his voice low, almost amused. "You always say, just, Harry. As if there's ever only that." When the noise of the party dulled behind them, Harry stayed where she was, unsure whether to move or speak. Zwan's presence seemed to draw the light away from everything else. He stood close enough that she could hear the even rhythm of his breath, slow and unhurried. The apology she'd rehearsed dissolved before it reached her lips. "I thought I misjudged you," she managed finally, her voice too thin. "If I offended you that day, I'm sorry." Zwan tilted his head slightly, studying her as though she were a question he didn't plan to answer. "You're not the kind of person who offends easily," he said. "You run, but you still come back." His tone wasn't cruel, only certain. Harry felt heat rise in her face, confusion curling with something she didn't want to name. "That's not true," she whispered. Zwan's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. "Then why are you still here?" he asked, and the quiet that followed felt heavier than any accusation. She couldn't think of an answer, so she left him there, slipping back into the laughter and music, the echo of his voice following her like a touch she couldn't shake. Days after the party, Harry tried to settle back into routine, but nothing felt the same. Her thoughts carried him everywhere, the shape of his silence, the calm danger in his voice, the way he looked at her like he already knew what she was about to say. When her brother mentioned that Zwan would be coming by again for business, her pulse jumped before she could stop it. She told herself it didn't matter, but when the doorbell rang and she heard his low greeting in the hall, her hands wouldn't stay still. They crossed paths in the corridor later, her father's study door half closed behind him, papers scattered, voices raised from another room. Harry didn't mean to stop, but Zwan did. "You're avoiding me," he said. She froze, unable to deny it. "I'm trying to understand," she whispered. "Understand what?" His question cut through the air, sharp and calm. "Why you look at me like you're waiting for something to happen?" Her breath caught. She hated that he was right. "You don't know what you're doing to people," she said, meaning herself. Zwan stepped closer, the faint scent of smoke and rain clinging to him. "Maybe I do," he murmured. For a long moment neither spoke. Then her brother called her name from the other room, breaking the spell, and she turned away, her heart racing. Behind her, Zwan's voice followed quietly, almost to himself. "One day, Harry, you'll stop running and I won't." The world fell apart too quickly for Harry to understand it. One moment her brother was laughing beside her, the next there were sirens, glass, and hospital corridors that never seemed to end. When she lost him, her father began to unravel too, his company collapsing, old friends turning away with polite refusals. Harry stood in the doorway of his study and watched him plead for help that never came. Zwan appeared then, calm in the middle of the chaos, his voice low. "Say the word and I'll fix this," he told her. She shook her head, pride and grief tangled together. Days later, her father's heart gave out, and the house that once felt full now echoed with machines and silence. Desperate to keep what was left of her family's dream, Harry went to those her father had trusted, believing they would help. Their smiles were wrong from the start. The drink they offered burned bitter on her tongue, the room spinning too fast. She realized too late that she'd stepped into another kind of trap. The sound of the door opening was the last thing she remembered clearly, then a voice, cold and furious, cutting through everything. "Touch her and you'll answer to me." Zwan's men pulled her free, his coat around her shoulders before she even knew where she was. When she woke in a quiet room, safe but shaking, Zwan was there, sitting in the half-light. "You're safe now," he said, his voice unsteady for once. She tried to speak, to thank him, but the words dissolved into tears. He caught her wrist gently. "Don't thank me. Just stay still." The air between them was heavy with everything that had almost happened, everything that couldn't. He turned away, forcing distance. "Not like this," he said quietly. "Not until you know what you want." And for the first time, she heard something in his voice that wasn't control, it was fear. Days blurred together after that night. The world moved, but Harry didn't feel it, only the echo of too many losses circling inside her chest. The house felt emptied of sound except for the rain and the occasional voice on the phone that wasn't her brother or her father anymore. Zwan had left her in safety and disappeared again, and she told herself she was grateful, that she needed distance, yet her thoughts kept wandering back to the way his voice had cut through the dark like something she could trust. Every morning she woke half expecting to find him at the door. Every evening she told herself she was glad he wasn't. Sometimes she thought she heard his car outside, or caught a message that wasn't meant for her. Sometimes she imagined him watching just to be sure she was still standing. Sleep was worse, his name tangled with the names of the people she'd lost, her dreams a loop of grief and confusion. She wrote letters she never sent, tore them up, tried to believe that she could build something again from all that ruin. And somewhere, in another part of the city, Zwan sat in a room full of smoke and silence, hands clasped. Forcing himself not to move, not to reach for the phone, because he knew that if he heard her voice again, he wouldn't stop until she was near. The night the storm came, Harry was leaving the hospital when headlights cut across the rain and the world went white for a moment. A man stepped out, calm and smiling, and she froze when he said her father's name like it still belonged to him. Mr. Renaud, the man her father once trusted, the man who destroyed everything. His words dripped with poison disguised as kindness, talking about debts, promises, how her family owed him more than they knew. Harry tried to turn away, but he caught her wrist, the pressure sharp enough to make her breath break. Then the air shifted, heavy and silent, and Zwan was there, his coat dark with rain, his voice low and lethal as he said, "Let her go." The world seemed to stop between the three of them. Renaud laughed, said something about old business and little girls who didn't know their place, but Zwan moved before the words finished, shoving him back against the car, the sound of metal and thunder mixing. Harry could only watch, his eyes cold fire, his hands steady, every inch of him built to end what her father never could. "You think you can touch what's mine," he said, and even through the chaos his voice broke something in her, because he didn't mean ownership, he meant protection, and it scared her how much she wanted to believe it. Renaud's men appeared from the shadows, guns low, tension thick, and Zwan turned just enough to look at her, his face calm like he'd already decided the ending. "Get in the car," he said, and she obeyed before she could think, her heart running faster than her feet. From the window she saw him fight like the storm itself, precise, merciless, unshaken. When it was over, he came to her side, knuckles cut, eyes darker than the night. Neither spoke. The rain between them was the only sound, and somehow it felt like confession, silent, dangerous, and real. The night he brought her to his mansion, the air felt too still, the city far away, the storm outside pressing against the glass like it wanted to come in. Harry stood in the doorway, still trembling from everything that had happened, and when she tried to thank him the words broke halfway. Zwan only looked at her, silent, unreadable, until she said the one thing he didn't expect, "Please help me get the company back." For a long moment he said nothing, then his voice came out quiet and hard. "It's business, Harry. There's always a price." She took a step closer, her breath uneven, whispering that she would pay whatever it cost. The look that crossed his face wasn't satisfaction but fury. He caught her wrist before she could move again, his voice shaking now. "You think you can sell yourself like this? If I hadn't been there tonight, who else would you have offered it to?" The anger in him wasn't cold, it was protective, wounded, a mirror of everything she didn't understand. "No one," she said, "only you," and that stopped him completely. The silence between them was thick enough to feel. His hands fell away, and he turned toward the window, trying to breathe. "You don't know what you're saying," he muttered. "You don't know what I am." But she stepped closer anyway, because fear and trust felt the same in that moment. He exhaled slowly, forcing calm back into his body, then said without looking at her, "Not tonight. You need rest." Later, when she finally slept on the couch under the dim light, Zwan stood watching her for a long time, wondering when she had become the one thing he couldn't control. Morning came quietly, the rain gone, but its scent still heavy in the air. Harry woke with the thin light touching her face, and for a moment she forgot where she was, until she saw the folded blanket, the untouched cup of coffee on the table, and knew Zwan had been there watching over her. The house was silent now, his presence already gone, but something in her chest wouldn't let her breathe right. She walked through the hall, still in last night's clothes, finding a note on the counter, his handwriting sharp and simple, "I'll handle what's left. Don't look back." It wasn't a promise, it was a warning, and she felt it like a bruise. Days later, news spread, Reynolds' empire collapsed. The men who had betrayed her father ruined. The company returned to her name. No one said how it happened, but she knew. She saw him once more, from far away, standing on a balcony as if the city belonged to him, and the silence between them was enough. He didn't call her name, didn't move, only watched until she turned away. Life went on, quieter now, full of ghosts and unfinished words. But sometimes, when night fell and the wind carried the smell of rain again, she swore she could feel him there, somewhere in the dark, still watching, still guarding what he could never touch. And she understood at last, what bound them was not love or forgiveness, but the kind of darkness that saves you only by consuming itself.